Frank had spent 20 years of his life serving in the Marines. He was a brave and courageous soldier who had seen the horrors of war firsthand. He missed the sense of purpose and camaraderie that he had in the military, and he struggled with the transition to civilian society. Frank's difficulty adjusting to civilian life was compounded by the fact that he didn't have any prior experience with managing finances. He found himself struggling to make ends meet and was constantly worried about money. As time went on, Frank became increasingly isolated and lonely. He struggled to connect with others and found himself turning to alcohol as a way to cope with his feelings of isolation and stress. This only made matters worse, and Frank found himself spiraling out of control. Eventually, Frank lost his housing, which he had waited 6 years to get. He was now homeless and living on the streets, with nothing but the clothes on his back and a few coins that he managed to beg for each day. Frank felt like he had hit rock bottom and didn't know how to get back on his feet. Frank meandered through the well-known streets of his hometown, his thoughts stuck in a loop, replaying a particular day from his past. It was a day he lost a comrade during a special operation, and he couldn't shake the memory. His mind was like a hamster wheel, always spinning until he turned to alcohol to escape the pain. As he strolled by a row of shops, his attention was drawn to a hair salon, its bright sign a beacon against the gray backdrop of the street. Frank caught his own reflection in the window, and he stopped in his tracks, momentarily stunned by what he saw. The man staring back at him was a far cry from the soldier he once was. His hair was overgrown and unkempt, and his beard had grown to a length that obscured his features. Frank felt a pang of shame, realizing how far he had fallen. He had become one of the many homeless veterans who roamed the streets, forgotten by society and left to fend for himself. As he continued to stare at his reflection, Frank felt a sense of determination wash over him. He knew he needed to make a change, to reclaim his dignity and start anew, but the path ahead was uncertain, and he wondered if he had the strength to face it. With a few begged coins clutched tightly in his hand, Frank hesitated outside the hair salon, uncertain if he had enough. Summoning the courage to enter, he was met with disdainful looks from the staff, one of whom even wrinkled her nose and commented on his odor. Frank felt embarrassed and ashamed as he tried to explain the situation. I'm sorry. I know I don't smell great, but do you think you could give me a quick buzz cut? He said softly. Olivia rolled her eyes and shook her head. Sorry, buddy, we're not a charity here. You should try looking for cans in the trash instead, she said, pointing to a nearby bin. Feeling embarrassed and dejected, Frank turned to leave the salon. As he was about to walk out the door, he heard one of the girls snicker and whisper something to her colleague. What a loser, the girl said loud enough for Frank to hear. I can't believe he even thought we would let him in here looking like that. The other girls laughed along with her, making Frank feel even more ashamed. Frank took a deep breath and tried to hold back his tears as he walked away from the salon. He couldn't help but feel like he didn't belong in this world anymore. He had given his all to his country, and this was how he was treated. It was a harsh reality that he had to face every day. Frank went out without saying anything back because he saw no point in reacting to something he was already used to. When he was outside, a young girl walked towards the salon. Rachel took one look at Frank and said, "Nice hairstyle, sir." She thought he had already gotten a haircut. "Thanks, but I don't really like it." Frank laughed and walked past her. Rachel was confused. "Sir, you just came out of our salon. Would you like to get your hair redone?" Frank stopped and looked at her with a smile on his face for a while. "Thank you, sweetheart. Your friends didn't have time for me," Frank said, trying not to blame them. Rachel thought it was strange because there were 2 available hairstylists. "Sir, come on in. I'll fix your hair," Rachel offered. Frank sighed and felt like he was forced to tell her what really happened. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry, sir. I just got to work. Let me give you a nice one to make it up. I'm full of energy right now." Rachel smiled. "I'm sorry, honey, but I can't even pay you. I only got a quarter and a dime. Do you think you could just give me a buzz cut?" "Sure, sir. Come on in. I can give you a buzz cut if you want to, but I think I can give you something else that you will really like." Rachel smiled and asked Frank to come in, holding the door. Rachel and Frank walked into the salon. Olivia couldn't help but notice them and let out a slight groan. "Oh, here we go again," she thought to herself. Rachel, oblivious to Olivia's reaction, walked over to the receptionist and greeted her with a smile. "Hey Tina, can you please call the lady that had an appointment for 10 and ask if she can come later? Like say 11:20? She asked cheerfully. Why? What happened? Tina asked. Oh, I've got a client here. Rachel looked at Frank. Tina looked Frank up and down. We kicked this guy out just before he came in. What did he tell you to get you to do his hair? Tina asked. Hey, Tina, take it easy, alright? Jesus, Rachel replied, taking off her jacket. Rachel, you sound like you know this bum. Why do you even care? Or is he your father? Tina asked and laughed. Rachel looked up at her anger building up, but then she remembered that she needed to control her emotions and not go down on her level. She sighed and said, Sure. What if he is my father? What then? Frank stood there not knowing what to do. He didn't want to cause any trouble or get them to call the police. He just wanted to leave at that moment. Olivia walked out from another room. She saw Frank standing there and sighed. What are you doing here? Didn't I tell you to stay away from here? Rachel turned to Olivia, a bit surprised. Oh, hi, Olivia. How are you? She asked, trying to make small talk. Olivia put on a fake smile. I'm fine, thanks, she replied before turning back to her magazine. Rachel, sensing the tension in the air, decided to just ignore Olivia and focused on her client. The girls continued to make unpleasant comments and Rachel tried to reason with them, but it only made the situation worse. Frank could see how upset Rachel was getting and apologized for causing trouble. I'm so sorry, Rachel. I'm just gonna take off. I don't want to make them feel uncomfortable. Thank you so much. Frank got up and began to leave. No, sir, you have done nothing wrong. These girls need to learn some manners and not judge people based on their appearance. Rachel was shouting at girls. You guys are pathetic. I can't believe I've been working with you. Rachel was furious. She grabbed her jacket and left, slamming the door. Rachel, sweetheart, I'm so sorry about what happened. Frank was apologetic. It's been just 2 weeks, sir. It's not a big deal. I will manage. And I'm still gonna make sure you get a haircut, alright? Rachel was determined. They left the salon and Rachel offered to go to her place where she could give him a nice haircut. After Rachel was done cutting Frank's hair, she suggested, You can take a shower and relax a bit. Frank hesitated at first, but eventually agreed, feeling grateful for Rachel's kindness. As he took a warm shower, he couldn't help but feel overwhelmed by the feeling of being clean again after such a long time. Wow, this feels amazing, he thought to himself. When he stepped out of the shower, Frank was surprised at how much better he looked with a new haircut and trimmed beard. He stood in front of the mirror for a while, admiring his reflection and feeling a newfound sense of confidence. But as he continued to look at himself, he suddenly felt a wave of sadness wash over him. This is how I used to look before I became homeless, he thought, his eyes swelling up with tears. Rachel noticed Frank's sudden change in demeanor and approached him with concern. Hey, are you okay? She asked softly, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. Frank wiped away his tears and managed a small smile. Yeah, I'm fine. It's just, I never realized how much I had lost until now, he said, his voice breaking a little. Rachel nodded understandingly. I get it, but remember, this is just the beginning. You can get back on your feet and have a better life again, she said, giving him a supportive hug. Frank felt a glimmer of hope in his heart, grateful for Rachel's words of encouragement. Thank you, feeling a renewed sense of determination to turn his life around. As they sat together sipping coffee, Frank told Rachel his story and how he ended up on the streets. Rachel was moved by Frank's story and realized how many people like him could be struggling on the streets. Rachel pondered how she could use her time productively now. After all, she wasn't going back to the salon. She wasn't that good yet, and therefore still on probation. She looked at Frank, and it dawned on her. Mr. Nash, do you know a lot of people that are homeless? Rachel asked suddenly. Yeah, I know a few, Frank replied. Rachel had an idea to practice her hairstyling skills by giving haircuts to homeless people for free. As she considered this, she thought it might be helpful to have some company and turned to Frank. Mr. Nash, she said, I know this is a bit unconventional, but would you like to join me in going around and offering haircuts to those in need? Frank, with plenty of time on his hands, readily agreed. Rachel and Frank approached their first customer for their new initiative, a homeless man named Mark, who happened to be a longtime friend of Frank's. As they made their way over to him, Mark was caught off guard and surprised to see Rachel with Frank, but he didn't initially recognize Frank due to his neat attire. It wasn't often that someone dressed so nicely would even acknowledge him, let alone strike up a conversation. Hey Mark, how's it going? Frank greeted him warmly. Mark was taken aback. Frank, is that really you? Frank laughed. Yeah, man, it's me. Listen, Rachel and I are starting a new project, and we thought you might be interested. Mark looked skeptical. What kind of project? We're giving free haircuts to homeless people in the area, Rachel chimed in. Mark's eyes widened in surprise. Wow, that's really kind of you guys. Most people just ignore us or avoid us altogether. We're not most people, Frank said with a grin. So, what do you say? Want a trim? Mark hesitated for a moment before finally nodding his head. Sure, why not? Can't remember the last time I got a haircut. Rachel and Frank exchanged the look of excitement as they began to set up their makeshift salon. It was just the beginning of what they hoped would be a meaningful and impactful project. As they worked, they discovered something surprising. Many of these people were skilled professionals who had fallen on hard times. They met former engineers, chefs, and even a former lawyer. Inspired by the resilience and talents of the people they met, Rachel began sharing their stories on social media, hoping to raise awareness about the issue of homelessness. To her surprise, the posts went viral, and soon social media users from all over were donating money to their cause. With these funds, Rachel and Frank were able to expand their outreach, offering not only haircuts but also job training, resume building, and networking opportunities to the homeless individuals they encountered. They were determined to help people get back on their feet and reclaim their lives. In just under 2 months, Frank and Rachel had made remarkable progress in their mission to help the homeless. With the support of generous donors and their tireless efforts, they were able to assist many people in need. The work had also helped Frank. He was no longer living on the streets and had a newfound sense of purpose. Rachel recognized Frank's dedication and hard work and offered them a place to stay and help with their growing charity. Together, they decided to establish a non-profit organization dedicated to helping the homeless community. The charity gained momentum quickly, with more volunteers and donations pouring in each day. Rachel's passion and leadership skills soon made her the natural choice to lead the organization, and she became its chairwoman. Frank took on an administrative role, helping to manage the day-to-day operations and ensuring that the charity stayed true to its mission of helping people get back on their feet. Together, they continued to make a positive impact on the lives of those who had fallen on hard times. Once, Frank and Rachel were enjoying a peaceful afternoon lounging on the grassy lawn of the park. Frank had a content smile on his face as he reflected on his work. This kind of work reminds me of my days in the Marines, he said. I love being part of a team and working alongside truly loyal people. Rachel sat beside him, appearing more subdued than usual. Frank noticed her demeanor and grew concerned. Is everything okay, Rachel? Rachel took a deep breath, gathering her courage before confiding in Frank. My dad was actually killed when he was in the Marines, she revealed, her voice soft and trembling with emotion. Frank's expression softened as he reached out to comfort her. I'm so sorry, Rachel. That must have been incredibly difficult for you. Rachel nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. It was, but talking to you about it actually helps. It's not something I usually talk about. Frank nodded in understanding. I get it. It's not easy to open up about something like that, but I'm here for you, Rachel. You can always talk to me. Rachel managed a small smile through her tears, feeling grateful for Frank's kind words and support. Thank you, Frank. That means a lot. Ever since Rachel's father passed away, she had been searching for people who had served in the Marines. She believed that listening to their stories would bring back fond memories of her father's pride and eventually help her overcome her grief. What Frank didn't know was that when Rachel first saw Frank, she knew he was a former Marine based on his behavior and mannerisms. Their friendship deepened, strengthened by their shared experiences and their commitment to making a positive impact in the world. They knew that together, they could accomplish great things and help many people in need. As Rachel and Frank walked home from work one day, they happened to pass by the hair salon where Frank was denied a haircut. Memories flooded back to them, and Frank couldn't help but stop and look at the place. Remember this place? Frank asked, a smile spreading across his face. Of course I do, Rachel replied with a grin. This is where it all began. Just then, Olivia came outside and saw Rachel and Frank standing there. She looked at Rachel with a sneer and addressed Frank. Is this woman bothering you, Mr. Nash? Rachel was taken aback by Olivia's hostility and looked at Frank with a puzzled expression. "Not at all, Olivia," Frank said with a smile. "In fact, Rachel is the new owner of the salon." Olivia's face fell. She didn't understand what was going on. But a moment later, she realized that the man she had previously kicked out of the salon was the same man who had bought it. She felt embarrassed and ashamed of her behavior towards Frank, and Rachel could see the guilt written all over her face. Olivia hesitated for a moment before speaking. "I'm sorry for how I treated you before, Mr. Nash," she said, and ran back inside. She didn't know whether to stay or leave. Rachel was taken aback by the unexpected turn of events. It transpired that Frank and some of his fellow charity workers had been on the lookout for a hair salon that would cater to everyone, regardless of their background or financial situation. They had come across the owner of the salon, who was struggling, and expressed her willingness to sell it. Frank and his team seized the opportunity and decided to gift the salon to Rachel as a token of appreciation for her hard work and dedication. When Frank shared the news with Rachel, she was overwhelmed and couldn't believe what she was hearing. "You guys bought me a hair salon?" she exclaimed. "Yes, we did," Frank confirmed with a grin. "It's all yours, Rachel." Tears of joy streamed down Rachel's face as she hugged Frank tightly. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Thank you so much." Frank patted her back and said, "You deserve it, Rachel. You've been working hard and we wanted to show you our appreciation. We hope this will help you achieve your dreams." Rachel smiled through her tears, feeling a renewed sense of purpose and excitement. She was grateful for the support and encouragement she had received from Frank and the charity workers. As the group stood outside the newly acquired salon, they watched as the workers put up a brand new sign that read, "Rachel's." Rachel felt a sense of pride and accomplishment as she gazed at the sign, realizing that her dream was finally coming to fruition. "I can't believe this is happening," Rachel said, her voice trembling with emotion. "It's real, Rachel," Frank said reassuringly, "and it's all yours." Rachel couldn't stop smiling as she walked towards the entrance of the salon, her heart bursting with excitement. "I want to offer free haircuts to all the homeless people in our community," she declared. "Anytime they need it, no questions asked." The group looked at each other, all nodding in agreement. "I'm not surprised at all," Frank said and smiled. The charity also continued to grow, and Frank finally found a purpose in life. He learned to live in the civilian world, had a place to call home, and a job he loved, helping people in need. Frank and Rachel's charity had given hope to the homeless, and it showed that a little kindness can go a long way.